Welcome to the Centuries of Sound Radio podcast, the mid-monthly show where we discuss and give some context to these records.
My lord and gentlemen, Centuries of Sound.
If you enjoy these programs, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. For $5 or local equivalent per month, you can get full downloads of mixes and these radio podcasts a year earlier. Centuries of Sound is an independent podcast without any advertising, and it's only with the support of patrons that the show can survive. Find out more at patreon.com/Centuries of Sound.
Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio.
Hello and welcome to Centuries of Sound, the show where we use original recordings to travel back into audio history. I'm James.
And I'm Sean.
And today we're covering the year
1900.
So the year 1900. Is this the new century? What do you think?
It's quite difficult to say, really, because obviously it is numerically a new century. If you mean, does this mark a new era? Most historians say you've got to go up until about 1914.
The problem with centuries, of course, comes because the first year was AD 1 or 1 AD. It wasn't 0 AD. It's a new decade, we can say at least. Everything we've heard so far in this show in the 1800s is starting to change. And you might notice, we saw lots of changes in the last episode. And this time we're going to see even more changes in a few different ways. Not quite as dramatic as last time, perhaps, but very much moving on. Changes that haven't quite filtered through entirely to the music we're going to hear, but which are going to turn everything upside down. The beginnings of a music business or a music industry, in terms which are much more familiar to us than anything seen so far. All due to the kind of duplicitous shenanigans which will also seem typical of the music business in the 20th century. So what else is going on in the year 1900?
Well, as you say, obviously it's the turn of the century in England, Britain, I should say. We have the first meeting of the Labour Party, which is in February 27th.
And they're still going, the Labour Party?
They are still very much going, still very much alive.
Right.
They don't really elect... They're not a proper electoral force at this point. In the next general election, they will have a total of 2 MPs.
This is we're still talking about 1900 here, yeah?
Still 1900,
right,
yep.
Okay.
But yes, this is the first meeting of what one might call a working man's party. Up until now, the working men have voted either Liberal or Conservative, really depending on the issue of the day. They've tended to vote Liberal more than Conservative. And
they're all allowed to vote now?
Pretty much. If you're a man, you're allowed to vote now. If you're a woman, you still got to wait a good long while. But yes, almost every man is allowed to vote now unless you're in prison. But no, that is the mark of what will become the 20th century, which is the rise of socialism and working men's groups. Very much the preoccupation, certainly of the first 3 quarters. So that's quite big in terms of that. We also have the second Olympic Games in Paris. They're not very big at this point. The first Olympic Games 4 years earlier was announced a great fanfare in Athens, but this time this is just a side to the Paris World Fair. The Olympics have become popular really for another 8 years, but this is the second modern Olympics.
There were loads of strange disciplines in this Olympics, I believe, if I remember right. They had painting and poetry, things like that.
All part of the original Olympics, to be fair, but not our modern Olympics. In the same way, the Labour Party of 1900 is not the modern Labour Party, but this is the emergence of 2 distinctly modern.
You know, I would watch more of the Olympics if they had a wider range of things they were judging there. I think we should bring back poetry to the Olympics.
I think so.
Yeah. And I think they should have a freestyle event where you just do whatever it is you're good at.
A talent show. The world's got talent.
If you're good at running, you do running. If you're good at like flipping beer mats, you can flip beer mats. If you're good at making speeches, you can make a speech. You know, that kind of thing. It would be brilliant.
I can see that.
That would be the best event, I think. Yeah. Okay, what else is going on in 1900 apart from that? Is there anything else to report?
There's another US presidential election. William McKinley resoundingly beats William Jennings Bryan in a rerun. His vice president this time being a young Theodore Roosevelt, who we'll hear more about in future episodes.
Okay, and we'll hear more about this William Jennings Bryan a bit later.
Yes, we will indeed. Other events to follow, I believe.
Yes, they are. Events continue to proceed. Let's have a bit of music then. We haven't had any music yet. At this time, most of our artists are working for Edison's recording label, and many of them have names which are his house bands. This is the Edison Grand Concert Band, so I believe that includes a couple more players than usual, maybe 6 or 7 rather than the 4 we've got accustomed to. And the song is called Mr. Thomas Cat. It's got a tinge of ragtime to it. It's got that kind of jaunty rhythm and a bit of a kind of solo towards the end of it. So it does sound a bit different from what we've been listening to in previous years.
Let's give it a whirl.
Mr. Thomas Cat, played by the Edison Concert Band.
Mr. Thomas Cat by the Edison Grand Concert Band there. What did you make of that then, Sean?
It was quite rousing and exciting, I thought.
Yeah, rousing in a more loose and free-flowing way than the rousing military kind of style we've got used to, I'd say.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting they still have the man announcing at the beginning.
They do. Right up to 1910 on cylinders, although we do also have disc recordings now.
So what is the story of these discs and cylinders?
Well, we have these two competing standards right now. Of course, Thomas Edison, he has his wax cylinders, but now we have Emil Berliner's flat discs. An early version of the 78 RPM discs, the shellac discs, which you may know dominated for the next 50 years or so. So it's a long time for a format to be dominant. It's amazingly, albums are only from 1950 or so.
Really?
So there's no albums before Well, it's a lie. There's no LPs before 1950. There are albums, which is like a book of 78s.
Wow.
So Emil Berliner, who is he? Well, Emil Berliner is a German inventor. He was born in Hanover in 1851, and the Franco-Prussian War came along when he was 18 years old.
Very inconvenient.
So he decided to emigrate to the USA instead of being drafted for that. As he was already a budding inventor, he found work for the sometime Edison-affiliated Bell telephone after he invented an improved telephone transmitter. So he had a hand in the invention of the microphone, really, there. But he went on his own way pretty soon. In the 1880s, he developed a disc recording system. So this is the days when the cylinder is still on the drawing board, really. And his disc recording system produced playable discs by 1889, and he went into business with Kammer and Reinhardt, a German toy maker, and they made 5-inch rubber discs, but they never really sold them. This venture didn't last very long. Then in the 1890s, he started to try to form some companies. There was one called the American Gramophone Company, which again failed before issuing a single machine or disc. The next one in 1894 was a bit more successful. It was called the United States Gramophone Company, and they started to sell some machines and 7-inch hard rubber discs. And in 1895, they replaced the rubber with shellac, which worked better, and that remained the standard until the 1930s. So It was going through a long way. So you think Emil Berliner is going to be a massive success now?
Oh, yeah.
Well, no.
Oh.
Yes and no. The production started to increase, but in 1897, his mastering plant in Washington burned down, which destroyed all of his equipment and the masters of his recordings, which is bad.
Yes, to put it mildly.
So that wasn't the end, but the end was coming pretty soon. He managed to resume production in a few months, but next problem he had was that companies began to copy his invention. Copyright was not very well worked out in these days, and he did what he could. He shut down 2 of these operations before finally finding that his agent in New York, Frank Seaman, was manufacturing identical copies of his gramophone called the Zonophone. You might have heard of, there's a various record labels called Zonophone something in the early days as well. So it comes from that. So he decided to combat this by cutting off all supplies to New York. So then they sued him for breaching contract. And they got an injunction, and it all kind of collapsed, and it meant that the United States Gramophone Company went out of business.
So they were copying his stuff, and they managed to get an injunction on him?
Yes, they had better lawyers, it seems. He tried to lift the injunction, but it didn't work. There was nothing he could do, and he quit the business entirely. He transfers his assets to some guy called Eldridge Johnson, who'll be around a bit later. And Eldridge Johnson launched the Victor Talking Machine Company, who is the predecessor of some very famous record labels. So they were quite successful. So for now, he's not doing much. He does continue to be influential in the music business. He's a leading light in creating disc records. But at this point, he's been shut out of the business kind of unfairly. So in 1900, the gramophone's patent is now unenforced. And we could say recorded sound technology is in modern terms open source. Anyone could open a record company and even a record player company, and many did. So in the coming years, we'll hear recordings from all manner of labels around the world. So that is good.
Yes. Except for Berliner.
For Emil Berliner, he'll find his way to continue in the business. His patents for various things will keep him going.
Oh, good.
But the technology is open source now, so we will have an explosion of recordings now and much more to choose from. The limited selection we had so far is less than desirable, so thankfully we'll have more to be able to play to now. Let's have an example of one of the big hits of this year. It's 2 different versions of it. If you were listening last time, Sean was unfortunately sick. Are you okay now?
I am fine now. I've recovered from the rabies I had.
Okay. Really? They put you into a coma. That's the only way they can cure rabies, isn't it? I heard it's been done a couple of times.
Has it? Wow.
All right, so let's hear one of the big hits of this year, actually written the year before. We've spoken before about Arthur Pryor. He's the leader of Sousa's band, and he's starting to bring kind of ragtime stuff into these military marches. And this is one of his biggest hits. Unfortunately, it has a horrible racist name with a racist epithet in it. It's called A Coon Band Contest. We're going to hear 2 versions of this. One of them is by the banjo maestro Vess L Ossman, and the second is by Sousa's band, led by Mr. Arthur Pryor himself. So let's have a listen to those 2. It is a good rollicking tune with an unfortunate racist name, like many things at this time.
Arthur Pryor's Coon Band Contest, led by Vess L Ossman, the banjo king.
record.
So there's two versions of the rather racistly named A Coon Band Contest. The first one by Vess L Ossman, the second one by Sousa's band, led by the writer of the song himself, Mr. Arthur Pryor. Quite a jaunty tune again. We've been high on the jauntiness so far, haven't we?
You mentioned something about a fairground. You're hearing this isn't on a fairground, right?
Yeah, I was at Bliss Hill in Shropshire, which is near my sister lives there. Well, not she doesn't live in Bliss Hill. There was an old one of these living museums. They had a fairground, and the carousel there was playing this song. Obviously, they didn't announce the name. That would have been awful. But I recognised it. Oh, I know that song. They played "Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight" as well. So it's a very odd thing. Let's spread our net a bit wider to other popular culture in the year 1900. This is a interesting thing. It's the first sound film in a way. We did have a sound film before with music. This would say the first sound film with speech, you could say, and it's in colour as well. So it's a scene from Cyrano de Bergerac in French, of course. And it's a colour sound film. It's a short clip, but it exists, and it comes from this year. Let's have a listen to that. It's pretty short.
Fragment de Cyrano de Bergerac par M. Potin. Balade usuelle. En hôtel Bourguignon, M. de Bergerac fut avec un blé. Qu'est-ce que c'est ça, s'il vous plaît? C'est le Attendez, je souhaite faire. Je jette avec grâce mon feu. Je fais lentement l'abandon du grand manteau qui me calfeutre et je tire mon espadon. Élégant comme Céladon, agile comme Scaramouche.
Okay, a scene there from the 1900 film of Cyrano de Bergerac. The only scene, in fact. And if you would like to see the visuals that go along with that, just go onto YouTube, search for Cyrano 1900. There's quite a few people have uploaded it. What did you make of that?
I was quite pleasantly surprised by the quality of both the video and the sound, actually. I thought it was quite impressive. Was each film, when shown, given with a cylinder? Or was it only shown at one time at one place and never brought the cylinder with me? This is
an experimental sound film,
right? So
there wasn't a standardised way of doing it. It was played on a cylinder while the film played on the screen, and it's a one-off thing really. It was an experiment. We have various different formats of sound film until they finally take off in 1927. But we'll come to some of those a bit later. So what else was going on in the world of culture in the year 1900?
So we have the first edition of The Wizard of Oz. It's produced in 1900. It sells over 25,000 copies in 2 runs in the first year alone.
That's quite a lot, is it?
It's quite a lot for, especially this era.
Okay.
I don't know how many of you have actually read the book, but it is quite different to the film. We're saying it's a lot darker, actually, in many places.
It's a strange book.
It's a very, very strange book. They have the Wicked Witch sends bees and crows and things, and they are proceeded to be eaten, have their spine snapped, etc., by Dorothy and her companions.
Wow!
So it's a bit darker than the film, but it is a true classic in the 1900s. It takes off very quickly,
and many sequels.
Yes, many
He
sequels.
wrote a load of sequels to it before he died about 20 years later.
It's very much as a golden age of American literature, I think.
And let's move into the world of great statesmen. We have interesting recording here. This is a recording of Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria.
Yes.
Who he wasn't doing anything particular at this time. How old was he at this time?
Oh God, he's in his 60s at this point. He's been ruling since the 1840s.
Okay. This is the one who would lead into the First World War?
He is
the same one?
He is the penultimate emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Really, he's the last emperor, because the last emperor didn't do very much.
Okay, so he's ancient when we get into the First World War, isn't he?
Yes, he's absolutely ancient. He is considered the father of the nation at this point. He's absolutely beloved by a lot of his subjects. He is very conservative, very resistant to reform, but as we're about to find out, actually quite interested in modern technology.
Oh yeah, well he'll spend a minute on it at least.
Yes,
he has made recordings. He made recordings with Ludwig Karl Koch. He made a recording with him, but unfortunately that was lost. With most of his recordings in the Second World War. So in this time, he's making another recording. It's not his first recording; it's his first surviving recording, and it's at an exhibition given by a man called Valdemar Poulsen. Valdemar Poulsen invented something called a telegraphone.
It's not what I think it is it?
A telegraphone. Well, it's a cross between a telegraph and a gramophone, you could say. It's got something that has. It's kind of one, kind of the other, and it has extra features as well. It doesn't really send things, although the plan was to send signals eventually.
Right.
It records sound magnetically. It's the first magnetic sound recorder, but it doesn't record it on tape. It records it on a thin piece of steel wire. So you've got a long piece of coiled wire which has a sound on it, and it makes a very different sound to the cylinder and disc recordings. It's very odd. It would bubble under for a long time. There's various versions of it. Eventually, it would become the Germans started to develop it in the 1930s.
Right.
When the USA invaded Germany at the end of the Second World War, they captured some of these magnetic tape recorders, and that's the basis of magnetic tape recording.
Really?
It was brought to the USA, and it was experimented on a bit, but it really took off when Bing Crosby started using it to record his radio shows in advance. And that's where magnetic tape took off, and it took over recording studios. That's why we've got different tracks and recording studios. So there's a long and prestigious history from this one recording. This is the only recording we have from one of this wire recordings. I've given it quite a prelude so far. It's not a particularly special recording. It's 9 seconds long. Let's have a listen to Emperor Franz Joseph.
Erfindung hat mich sehr interessiert und ich danke sehr für die Vorführung derselben.
So quite a different sound to these cylinders and discs, isn't it?
Yes, kind of ringing sound almost.
Well, the sound kind of seems to leak around the coils. So you've got sounds from one coil kind of leaking into the next coil, which gives you that kind of echoey sound. It's quite an odd thing, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, there you go. Not that important so far, but it will be very important. Okay, so that's in Europe. We have Emperor Franz Joseph not doing so much apart from recording that. How about around the world? Imperial...
Yes, so we are England, the United Kingdom, I should say, is currently fighting the Second Boer War.
Right, the second one. When was the first one?
Oh, the early 1890s.
Okay.
Effectively, this is a war over the United Kingdom's control of South Africa. The war extends from 1899 to 1901. Britain struggles against the Boers and their guerrilla tactics for a couple of years, but eventually over 20,000 British regulars arrives and steamrollers the Boers and combines the two Boer states of the South African Republic and the Orange Free State into the South African Union, or the Union of South Africa, which then becomes a British protectorate and remains so for the next 20, 30 years.
So there's a bit of a grim war, isn't there?
Very grim war. It divides British opinion at home bitterly. David Lloyd George makes his first start attacking the British actions in this war. It's very brutal. It's actually the first recorded uses of concentration camps.
Yeah.
Not by the Nazis in the 1930s, but by us, the United Kingdom and in South Africa. They round up a lot of undesirable South Africans and put them in camps.
Wow.
But yeah, in the end, United Kingdom succeeds, creates this new protectorate, and all is well in the empire. But no, yeah.
Oh, and Churchill was there, wasn't he?
Yes, Churchill was there in some minor capacity. I believe he served.
I think he was a journalist, and he
Yes.
got himself captured and escaped, according to his book.
Yes.
Yeah. And with some people say this is kind of the beginning of the end of the British Empire, where we realised we've pushed it too far, perhaps.
Some call it our Vietnam. Yes, it's that same fighting guerrillas and thinking, what are we doing this for? But it is the last expansion of the British Empire until past World War One, where we take over some protectorates. We are in. I think if you ask someone on the 1900s, they would say the British Empire is already, it is at its zenith. We're doing fine. The empire will long continue. But looking back, we can say this may be the high point of it. It may be all downhill from now on.
It's the first kind of feeling that we're not invulnerable. We could be defeated
And
by
And also the United Kingdom starts to question itself, I think, in a way it hasn't before about the rightness of its imperial ventures.
Mm-hmm. Were there horses involved in this war?
Yes, there certainly were. Horses remain vital up until World War One.
Now we have a cavalry regiment there, so it's a very tenuous connection I'm trying to build in there.
There is one nonetheless.
Yeah, the tenuous connection to this is a xylophone solo by Mr. Charles P. Lowe, and it's called Brilliant Gallop. Charles P. Lowe there with Brilliant Gallop. Again, I keep saying jaunty, but it's a very high-tempo, exciting piece. The xylophone was a big instrument at this time. It was one of the ones that you keep coming across solos on. I feel when we get into the jazz age and forward, the xylophone is no longer so important.
Yes.
Maybe for the best. We have plenty of examples of virtuoso xylophone playing from these years, and maybe that's enough.
Maybe that is enough.
Know
when to stop.
Should we talk about Haig? William Haig. Not William Haig.
Not William Haig. The Haig.
The Haig.
The Haig, the court.
So he's not the Haig.
No, he's not the Haig. No,
Okay.
I bet he probably thinks he does.
No, right.
So the Hague, the forerunner to the International Court, is founded in 1900. The Hague and the Olympics, again, two new modern institutions, not modern, familiar to us today, that are set up in 1900, which is reinforcing, I feel, the idea that while 1900 may not be the turn of a new century in that it's not substantially different from 1899, we are beginning to see the first roots of what we would be familiar with today. I suppose what the question I wanted to ask was, is that the same with music? Are we turning towards modern music at long last, or are we still...
Well, I think we see years where suddenly everything lurches forward.
Yeah.
And I think it's not one of those years.
Okay.
I think we had one of those years in 1897.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see another one of them in, I think there's another one of them in a few years, let's say, maybe next year even.
Ooh.
But I think it's kind of a slow progress generally.
Mm-hmm.
And there's huge ones coming up in, for example, 1917 and like 1923, gigantic leaps forward in those years. And we'll see them again throughout musical history, getting closer and closer perhaps. Although less in the recent years, perhaps.
I suppose it's hard for us to see because we're closer to them.
Yes, I'd say so. But I don't know if the world of music is as unrecognisable to us, to somebody 10 years ago. I think it would be pretty recognisable, the world of music now, to somebody 10 years ago, which would not be the case through the 50s, 60s, 70s. I'd say 10 years is a world of difference through those decades.
Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio.
So one thing we talked about a little last time was the world of vaudeville.
Yeah.
And we are getting more vaudeville recordings now instead of minstrel shows, which is kind of a relief. And of course, people these days think of vaudeville, they think of the comedy sketches. This is a comedy sketch that you heard quite a lot. It's called The Arkansas Traveller. Right. And there was a folk song on the fiddle called The Arkansas Traveller, and it was built into a kind of comedy routine. So there'd be a lost travelling city person, and he would meet a local wisecracking fiddle player, and then they'd make various jokes about the fiddle player deliberately misunderstanding him. Let's hear the earliest recording of The Arkansas Traveller. It's Len Spencer, who's always available to play on anything, it seems, and with the famous violin player George Schweinfest.
The Arkansas Traveller by Spencer and Schweinfest, Columbia Records. Why, how do you do, boss? What might your name be? Say, what made you think I was boss, yeah? Well, I just guessed it. Well, guess what my name is? How far is it to the next crossroads? Well, just follow your nose and you'll come to it. Just one moment now. Where does this road go to? Why, it don't go anywhere. Stays just what it is. Why, see here, I'm a lawyer, and a pretty smart one, too. Do I look it? Well, yes. Now, I had a lawsuit about this here house about a year ago. Well, did you have a smart lawyer? Yeah, you just bet I did. He owns the house now. Here, there's a leak in the roof of your house. Why don't you get it fixed? 'Cause it's been a-raining lately. Yes, why don't you get it fixed when it's not raining? 'Cause when it don't rain, it don't leak. Well, for pity's sake, play the rest of that tune. Well, I just reckon there's no man living smart enough to do that. Oh, yes, there is. I can if you'll let me. Oh, thank you. By Chowder, stranger. Why, you're the smartest man living. Come right inside.
So some 119-year-old comedy there. It's not completely unfunny. No, there were some things that were vaguely funny there. Some jokes you might still recognise. If you hear those jokes going on these days, then yeah, you know how old they are. Yeah, I think I have heard some of those being told by people these days as well. So
yes,
you know quite how old those jokes are. At least 119 years old, probably older. Okay, let's let's hear this. I don't have much of an introduction for this. This is Charles Dalmain and Polish National Dance. Okay, so Charles Dalmain there, a famous violin player. A few words about him. He was a violinist with the New York Metropolitan Orchestra and chiropractor as well, apparently. He's best known today for his prolific activity as a pioneer recording artist. He made many recordings at this time. He was the violin soloist of choice, both for Edison Records and for Victor Records, so both of the big two there. And he made many recordings. This is just one of them. I don't know what connection it has to Poland, but it was called the Polish National Dance, apparently. Let's have a recording here from a man called Alessandro Moreschi. Have you heard the name of Alessandro Moreschi before?
I have not.
It's an interesting recording. We'll talk more about him next time. But I'd just like to play it now and see if you can notice anything odd about his voice. Yeah. Well, impossible to pick out his voice there unless you're listening for it. We'll come back to him later. It'd be a nice surprise next time, I think.
Little prelude there.
Yeah, prelude. Well, it's the whole choir. You can't really pick out his voice in particular, but it is an interesting thing we're going to find out about. Let's talk about William Jennings Bryan. He's just lost a second presidential election.
He has.
But at this time he decides to, we've got a recording of his voice finally to have a talk to us about imperialism. So who is William Jennings Bryan?
William Jennings Bryan is one of the foremost democratic figures of, and I took up Democrats, I mean the Democratic Party.
We talked about before his he when he was standing for election the first time, he had a speech about
silver and gold.
Silver and gold,
yes.
Yeah. He wanted to change from the gold standard to the silver standard.
Yes, he is a great progressive figure. So that was in the last election. 4 years on, the economy is doing well, and so the gold and silver standard have largely lost their potency. So he fights the second election on the issues of imperialism. Mm-hmm. He is for Cuban independence and eventual assumption into the United States. He is for American non-intervention elsewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. He, as you know, loses the second election, but he is a great figure in American history. Later on, has some slightly weird views. He attacks the teaching of evolution in schools,
With that famous trial he's involved in, yeah. But at least he won't stand for president again.
Well, he does stand.
Oh, yeah.
in 8 years' time. But no, so this is the hot issue of the 1900 elections he's speaking on.
He doesn't stand against Roosevelt. He seems to like Roosevelt, doesn't he?
No, I think Roosevelt's progressive enough of a figure that he stands with him. He stands against William Howard Taft.
Okay.
In 1908.
So another walrus.
Yes.
Coming
he does
up.
look like a walrus, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the qualifying things to be a presidential candidate in this time. Let's hear William Jennings Bryan talk about imperialism then.
I can conceive of a national destiny which meets the responsibilities of today and measures up to the possibilities of tomorrow. Behold a republic resting securely upon the mountain of eternal truth. A republic applying in practice and proclaiming to the world the self-evident proposition that all men are created equal, that they're endowed with inalienable rights, that governments are instituted among men to secure these rights, and that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Behold a republic in which civil and religious liberty stimulate all to earnest endeavor, and in which the law restrains every hand uplifted for a neighbor's injury. A republic in which every citizen is a sovereign, but in which no one cares to wear a crown. Behold a republic standing erect while empires all around are bowed beneath the weight of their own armament. A republic whose flag is love, while other flags are only fears. Behold a republic increasing in population, in wealth, in strength, and in influence, solving the problems of civilization and hastening the coming of a universal brotherhood. A republic which shakes thrones and dissolves aristocracies by its silent example and gives light and inspiration to those who sit in darkness. Behold a republic gradually but surely becoming a supreme moral factor in the world's progress and the accepted arbiter of the world's disputes. A republic whose history, like the path of the just, is as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day.
Quite a very patriotic speech. Obviously, you need to be patriotic if you're an American presidential candidate. A little bit messianic, perhaps.
Yes, and the irony of saying that while calling for the armament of the National Guard and effectively evading Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, there's many kind of contradictions from all the politicians of this time, seems, from our modern perspective. Maybe we shouldn't judge him quite so much on this, although I have some political speeches coming up a while later where I kind of agree with everything they say, which is going to be odd when that comes up.
See if you can guess the speaker which James is referring to.
You will not guess. It's a strange one. To come much later. Let's have a look at politics all around the world. What's going on in, for example, Asia right now?
So China is fighting with pretty much anyone with any interest in getting a slice of the imperial pie in the Boxer War.
The Boxer Rebellion.
The Boxer Rebellion. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a very odd war, I would say, because listeners might not realise I spent most of my adult life in China, so I know more about Chinese history than about other countries, except perhaps Britain or America. But yeah, I did live in Beijing for 5 years or so I've seen all the places that were attacked during the Boxer Rebellion and heard the history of it. Why is it called the Boxer Rebellion, do you know?
It's named because it was after boxers, wasn't it? A lot of the people who started the rebellion were boxers.
Well, we called them boxers. Martial artists, like I would say kung fu or something. They were kind of a religious group which decided that they were, if they practiced certain exercises, they'd be immune to bullets, which they were not. And yeah, there were a lot of outrages against Chinese people before this.
Oh yeah,
because foreign powers were kind of invading and taking advantage, and well, not really invading, but just taking over and doing terrible things to local Chinese people. It was natural that something would happen eventually.
Yes.
The Chinese government was led by this woman, Cixi, who was, no one really looks back on her very well. So they kind of rose up and started killing missionaries and killing Christians as well. Like local Chinese people who converted. All the foreigners eventually were pushed into the district of Beijing with all the foreign embassies in it, and they had a siege there which lasted quite a while, and the forces of Britain and America and France and Japan and some
Germany
other countries, they all got together at one time. Those countries have all been united and invaded at the same time, and of course, Chinese lost and had to pay a lot of money in reparations for that. And another thing that made China resent the West a lot more, and for good reason as well. And I think Chinese people have not forgotten the invasion during the Boxer Rebellion. They have not forgotten this at all. One of the many kind of unnecessary humiliations that were imposed during the time of the late Qing dynasty, which I think we should be educated about in the West, because we did some bad things during that time.
Oh yes.
Sorry. Anyway, that's the Boxer Rebellion.
Yes.
So let's hear some things from East Asia. We don't have any Chinese recordings. We've got one from it's from Berlin really, but it's a Thai. Siamese, they would say at this time, theatre ensemble. But before that, a Japanese piece by Oppa Kekepi, and it's called Kawakami Noboro Isiao. I think that's right. It's probably completely wrong, but let's hear those.
になるのは米ばかりおっぺれべおっぺれべぽぺぽぽ世紀極まる今日に快眠昆虫怪事水まぶかにかぶった高帽子金の入り輪に金時計専門に試験に膝を曲げ芸者太鼓に金を巻きうちには蔵に米を積みただしネイルのお土産が地獄で閻魔に面会し賄賂使うて極楽へ行けるかへ行けないよおせげでおせげでポペポポ親が手術やドイツの風にして娘は玉の通りおペレレポペポポ娘の片手立派だがとっさん血統をこじりましどちらもお客を乗せたがる入り車は駆け引きだ本当に大して危ないよ親いけないねおペレレポペポ
So more kind of xylophone stuff there. Well, not a xylophone, a marimba or something. Anyway, or whatever they have in Siam or Thailand. Local instruments there. So lots of music going on around the world. I think world music is at this point untainted by, not to be tainted in the bad way, but untouched, let's say, by Western music. So you've got kind of the original traditional music there going on. Whereas these days, if they do that, it feels kind of
westernized.
Yeah, it's like they're looking for something that's not there anymore. They're trying to find the history that's not there, rather than the music that people in those places really do listen to. So, this time it's still alive. So it's kind of interesting for that reason.
Yeah.
Let's have a listen to our old friend Arthur Collins.
Yes.
This is a classic recording of his. It's called Mandy Lee.
Not Mandy, as I first thought and got excited.
It's not the famous song Mandy as popularised by
Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow.
Oh, get out, I saw you. Yes, I did. And I saw you with a gal. Couldn't help but see you. Yes, I knew you. Who was that? Who was that lady with you? Don't you know I know her? Yes, I do. She was once my sister's pal. You don't know that gal, he said, thoroughbred. Come ahead, listen to me. When me and Mandy hit that ballroom floor and I removed my Thelma can, and then we one set, two sets, hit them slide. I'm always happy when I'm by her side, and when you play that music, oh so sweet, and with the closest harmony, whee! All the swell folks looking at us, me and my Mandy Lee. Like to have you meet her. Yes, I would. She'd be glad to see you too. She is some good looker, some good cooker. Move along, come along up to the house, and if you like home cooking, she's a man sweet and suit you to a T. After soup and fishing all day's a ball. Come with my Mandy and me. When me and Mandy hit that ballroom floor, and I removed my Thelma can, and then we one set, two steps, hit and slide. I'm always happy when I'm by her side, and when they play that music, oh so sweet, and with the closest harmony, whee! All the swell folks looking at us, me and my Mandy Lee.
Listen, Henry, what tune is that?
What tune is what?
Why, the tune the orchestra is playing.
Oh, why, that's Mandy Lee.
Well, is she any relation to you, Mandy Lee?
Oh, yes, in a way, but I have never figured out just how closely related they is, because I was only interestedly concerned in my own Mandy.
Why, naturally, of course. Can she dance?
Sure she can.
Well, does she dance the machich?
The what?
The machooch?
I didn't get you.
Why, you know, the machouch.
Oh, you mean the marchich.
Sure, that's what I said.
Well, I should say she could. Just you watch the both of us now. When me and Mandy hit that ballroom floor, and I removed my Thelma can, and then we one step, two steps, skip and slide. I'm always happy when I'm by her side, and when they play that music, oh so sweet, and with the closest harmony, whee! All the swell folks looking at us, me and my Mandy Lee.
Arthur Collins, king of the ragtime singers there with Mandy Lee. It's a much better kind of singer than we've previously heard, don't you think?
Yes, his technique is there, and it's
He's got character and kind of warmth to him. He is doing an imitation that's kind of racist of a black man But, you know, still, it's an improvement on the worst ones we've heard before, I'd say.
Definitely so.
The biggest selling artist of this decade, so a star of the size of like Elvis at his time, but kind of forgotten these days. And unfortunately, he shares a name with an acid attacker in the last year or so. I'm sure the acid attacker will be forgotten fairly soon, though.
Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio.
You've been listening to Centuries of Sound on Cambridge 105 Radio. I've been James.
And I've been Sean.
And if you like what you've heard here today, please feel free to come along to our website, which is at centuriesofsound.com. If you come along there, you can find our regular monthly mixes, which are currently on 1911, background information, lots more. If you want to email us, the email address is centuriesofsoundmail, that's all one word, at gmail.com. And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, of course, as well. So what do you make of the music and other sounds of 1900?
I really enjoyed Arthur Collins, I've got to say.
Yep, he's a step up for sure.
He is.
I don't know if you heard Hello My Baby last week, but it was already a star there. I mean, maybe the first good singing star that we've heard.
Probably the most professional sounding singer I think we've heard so far.
He's got this business down. He knows how to put kind of a warmth and a performance into his voice. The other big star of this year we're going to play out on is Vess L Ossman again, the famous banjo player, maybe the greatest ever banjo player. And this is him playing the standard Old Folks at Home. Do you know the Old Folks at Home?
No.
You do, because it's also called Swanee River. Yeah, it's another one of these performances where he manages to take one of these standards and put something extra into it in a kind of proto-ragtime kind of style. Thanks for listening today. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoy these programs, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. For $5 or local equivalent per month, you can get full downloads of mixes and these radio podcasts a year earlier. Centuries of Sound is an independent podcast without any advertising, and it's only with the support of patrons that the show can survive. Find out more at patreon.com/centuriesofsound.